Giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakat, Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who teach the Bible in 100% truth. And shalom to the hopeful elect, starting with 144,000 of the nation of Israel, the hopeful elect, which consists of the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of North, Central, and South America, as well as the Israelite foreigners, the speckled bird living amongst the other nations. Shalom to you. So we're looking at prophecy yet again. We know we're in the time of the implementation of the MOTB. We're waiting for the final steps to be made for this particular prophecy to be fulfilled. And we're also waiting for the fulfillment of the Third World War, known as the Third Woe, which is developing at the minute down in the Middle East with the events that are taking place with the small hats. Jeremiah chapter 49:20 speaks of the least of the flock drawing out other nations into the Third World War. And we know that that's a step-by-step process. And these are the two major prophecies we're waiting to see. And then once we know that these happen, we know the return of Yahweh Shai is imminent after those two particular major prophecies. Now, if we were to go into each individual particular prophecy, you should understand, provided the Holy Spirit's working with you, all the details and all the scenarios that we're expected to see according to the scriptures. Yet one difficult thing to do is to try to line these up together to see how they play a part with each other. Don't forget the world is a stage, so we know that everything's coordinated and happening together. If you have a stage, you look at the minute, you look at certain countries and certain things that are going on, and it seems as if there's a particular play happening over here and another play happening over there. These are different circumstances, people are going through different events, and it seems to be different individual events, uncoordinated. But if the world is a stage, then that means everything is a stage, is all on one particular stage, and all these different things that we're seeing playing out are actually part of the same one particular major play. And ultimately this is controlled by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And on an earthly level, we look out for the fulfillment of these scriptures, and we take note of certain individuals, organizations that come out and speak, and we know these prophecies are soon to take place. At the minute we're hearing a lot about 2020 to 2030. We hear that from the WEF, from the IMF, and this is regarding the digitization of the economic system. Revelation chapter 13, the fulfillment of the MOTB. And yet, like I say, you see this world war, and we have somebody like Putin. Now we know Putin will be a major player in the Third World War, the destruction of America. Yet they seem to be playing ball with the digital financial system. We know that the banking elites have a thing called order out of chaos. So they create chaos by crashing the current economic fiat system. They're doing that by having opposition in terms of the BRICS. You have Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa coming together to create a new economic system in which to trade. This is in turn bringing de-dollarization, which is slowly but surely crashing the dollar as the main currency of the world. Once that happens, the banking elites will be right there at the door to introduce the CBDC, and they will say that all your digital transactions can come under this particular umbrella. So it seems funny how these particular nations work together and are coordinated to bring this digitization, yet when it comes to the Third World War, they seem as in opposition. Now, referring back to the scripture of Jeremiah 49:20, the least of the flock drawing out other nations. We've spoken about this in the last 2 weeks. And the situation happening down in the Middle East is definitely that, the beginning of this third woe, and it has to develop from there. We know certain scenarios that we've seen play out on videos are propaganda. There's secret messages within them. So we know that there's propaganda taking place. The least of the Idumean flock, the small hats, have created propaganda and a reason to go in and create trouble with a certain organization. And this is something that is going to eventually lead to the Third World War. But we also know that this is something that these Idumeans repeat on a regular basis throughout this kingdom. We've seen America, for example, and the same flock as these small hats, and they go out and do the same thing, create a propaganda, a reason to go in, and they try to win the minds of the voters to justify their actions, and then they go in by force and take over particular lands. So this all type of information is coming out, and it's bringing us to World War III. Yet we have this digitization on the other hand, where nations seem to be working together with it, and it can seem quite confusing. And we also want to understand how these things coincide with each other. You have articles like this, for example, headlines like this which are coming out all the time. Why so much is going wrong at the same time. Now ultimately this is Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai bringing the final judgment, the final prophecies together. You have the hour of temptation, the MOTB, and you have judgment for all the nations around the earth. And we have a thing called Jacob's trouble, which we mixed in amongst all that. And this is what we do. We pick on these particular articles and we show you that these particular prophecies are due to take place very soon. This is another one here. The CPMI pushes for harmonized cross-border payments data. This is all to do with speeding up the de-dollarization. But when we speak of these particular organizations, we speak of the WEF, the IMF, and so on and so forth. And everybody seems to be speaking of the 2020 to 2030 changeover. And ultimately it leads you to wonder who's really pulling the strings. We know that the banking elites are the ones that orchestrate all these particular moves. We know there's an element of risk. Once they create an opposition with the BRICS, it crashes their system, and then they can come with the rescue package. But at the same time, other nations are thinking they can take hold of this particular system and jump into the power seat, which currently America is in. So this is what we want to understand when we look at the, really looking at Revelation chapter 17 is where we need to look at. I have some information which I'm going to bring out in a minute. But before we do that, we'll look at chapter 17, Revelation. This is John on the island of Patmos, and he's written down, these visions that he's received from this particular angel through the Holy Spirit of these particular times that we're in now. And this is Revelation 17:1. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to breeze through the chapter. Really and truly, I have all these other chapters which link in, precepts that link in with this particular chapter, but I might just breeze through it and describe the events for the sake of time, and then we move it on from there. So this is 17:1. It says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." Now this great whore represents America, and the many waters is the multitudes, the different nations, the different different people of different nations, different languages, different cultures, all come together under the umbrella of America, and they all become American citizens. And that's what people have been doing over the years. They've been allured by the great whore to go over there and be part of that nation. And this is represented here by the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. This is 17:2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now this fornication represents spiritual adultery, spiritual fornication. This is not a physical thing. And the philosophies, the ideologies pushed forth by that whore have been pushed forth to the other kings of the earth, and they together have committed fornication with her by taking on these ideologies. Now, two of these particular ideologies, for example, one is democracy and one is the backing for the alphabet agenda. And, pretty much all nations that have committed fornication with this whore have taken on that democratic system, yet some of them don't want to take on board the alphabet agenda. This is just an example. But at some point they've all taken on board philosophies and ideas from the whore, and as it says here, they're made drunk. But eventually now you're in the time where these nations are starting to sober up. They're starting to see the wood from the trees. They're starting to realize the propaganda game that's played by these Idumeans, and something they've been doing over the years. So for example, what you're seeing down in the Middle East with the Levant, the small hats, the whole world is aware. They have Edomites now making videos saying, this is a repeat process. This is what the Idumeans, or what they call them, Europeans, have been doing for years, and they're speaking up against it. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast. Now this woman is the same whore. Now she's sitting upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now the 7 heads represent 7 kingdoms ruled by the Idumeans. You have the Greeks, the Spanish, the French, the Romans, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and the British. So these are 7 kingdoms ruled by Idumeans. Now I'm using that word Idumeans just to throw off the algorithm. This is chapter 12, Revelation verse 3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. The fact that it's great represents that it has alliances with other kingdoms, other people around it at the time, and that's what makes it great. The fact that it's red goes back to Edom, the Edomites, Adawam. Obviously, I'm using the phrase Idumeans to, like I say, to avoid. I'm going to start using that to avoid the algorithm. And a dragon is known for its fierceness and its keenness, and this is what it's representing. It says, behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. So jump back to chapter 17, Revelation chapter 17. So he carried me away in the spirit of the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon the scarlet-coloured beast. It's the same beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, 10 horns. Now the 7 heads, like I say, 7 kingdoms rule by the Idumeans, and the 10 horns represents the EU nations. They're once called the EEC, the European Economic Community. Started off with 10 initially started off with 10 members, which actually there were 12. You have Spain and Portugal, which are 2 nations but came under one, and you had England and Ireland, which were again 2 nations which came under one. So the fact that 2 of them, you had Spain and Portugal coming under one, you had England, Ireland coming under another. So this represented the 10 nations that had joined initially. When you fast forward to today, many other nations have joined, and the EEC is now the EU. But this is what it represents. So you have this woman, which is the whore, America, sitting upon this system, which is represented today, in modern day times. NATO is represented by the 7 heads. When you go to Revelation chapter 13, again, this is John. In these particular chapters, John is having visions of the latter days and certain events, and they're all pretty much leading up to the same event. It's just things have been broken down in different ways, and he's been given different aspects and different parts of it to understand. So when you go to chapter 13, Revelation, it speaks of this beast. It says, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And this represents the ancient Roman Empire, and verse 3 tells you, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all of the world wondered after the beast. So the 7 heads, and the Spanish, the French, the Greeks, the Romans, Germania Major and Germania Minor, and the British, and the one that was healed and wounded with a deadly wound then healed was the Roman Empire. Edomites fell out of power, fell away from the Roman Empire, and through the time known as Renaissance, the rebirth of the revised Roman Empire, that's what we're living in now, since that time now, in which these Idumeans have come out and reassumed power and have a time called Renaissance. So this is, and then again, when you jump down to verse 11, and it says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So this is talking about the revised Roman Empire coming back to power, using that democratic system. And eventually, what does this beast go on to do? In verse 16, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. So that's showing you that this beast represents a worldwide geopolitical economic system, and that's why eventually it will cause every single human. It will try to cause every single person, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, in their dominant hand or in their foreheads. And this is all one of the major prophecies we're waiting to be fulfilled. So going back to chapter 17, Revelation. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So we understand the modern day version of that is NATO and the EU. Then Revelation 17:4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So this woman, this whore, is arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, and this represents the splendour of America. When you go to Revelation chapter 18, which is just here, verse 19, Revelation 18 and 19, this is talking about the destruction of America. It says, and they cast dust upon their heads, these other nations, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in by the sea, by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour is she made desolate. So these other nations are going to weep when they see the destruction of America, and that is because they were once made rich through America, through the consumerism of America buying these goods as a consumer nation. And it says here, talks about her costliness. America is that nation that goes all out. You look at how the government, for example, what they do with their spending and then military power, for example. When America likes to turn up, they like to turn up and do it big. Everything is about bigger the better. And this all goes back to that costliness. A woman arrayed in purple and scarlet colour and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So, when you go to Jeremiah 51, it says Babylon, this is America again, that whore hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore the nations are mad, because they're starting to sober up and they're starting to realize, you're the one that's been sitting on this beast, this worldwide geopolitical economic system. You're the one that's riding it and using it to put yourself at the top, to bring about benefit for yourself. And what that's doing is just causing problems for the other nations around the earth, and their eyes are starting to open up and they're starting to see what's really been happening. So now we're in that time where these nations are starting to become mad. And again, like I said, America are pushing forth this, through the banking elites, through the ideas of them, they're pushing forth the agenda. They use people like the WEF, the IMF, to push this agenda of digitization. So other countries come into line, play the game, create the opposition, create de-dollarization, crash the system, and the banking elites will introduce a CBDC. So jump into, we read verse 4, 5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Because, again, America is pushing forth these ideologies, these philosophies, the alphabet agenda, so on and so forth. And when you go back to Revelation chapter 13, it speaks of two horns that spake as a lamb. Where is it? This is Revelation 13 and 11. And beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So this represents that political system. In ancient times, when the Roman Empire, ancient Roman Empire was in power, it had alliances with other smaller nations around it, and together they formed, one great big power, in terms of oppressing humans. So these other nations would have their own philosophies, have their own religions, have their own gods. Yet they would, as long as they paid tributary or taxes to the Roman Empire would allow them to live in the way that they want to live, as long as they agree to certain rules. And this then ended up being a controlling power over the people. And so regarding that particular point, regarding taxes in ancient Rome, and this is earlychurchstory.org website. If we jump down here to the second paragraph, it says here, whether you were male or female, rich or poor, white, brown or black, Christian, J-E-W, Roman or barbarian, if you belonged to Rome, you had to pay taxes to Rome in order to find those eligible for taxes and to collect all the various taxes. The Romans had the taxman. Now you notice it says here, whether you're Roman or barbarian. In today's society, they have a thing, this is part of the philosophy of Babylon the Great. In this day and age, you are either considered westernized, and you follow certain Western cultures, and if you're not, what are you considered? You're considered the opposition, or in today's terms, they call you a terrorist. Again, trying to avoid the algorithm. So that's how it is today. You're either considered westernized, You're down with this alphabet agenda and everything else, democracy. You think that the voting system is fair, and you give praise to it. So you're considered westernized, but if you're outside of that, they label you as a terrorist. And back in the ancient Roman Empire, you were either Roman, or you fell under Roman citizenship, or you were Romanized. Today, we have a thing called westernized or Americanized. And in ancient Roman Empire, you had Romanized, so you maybe living with your own people and following your own culture. And the Roman Empire's come and taken over your particular area, so that they hold the power over there. You're allowed to follow your own customs and traditions, but you start to change your habits. You start to adopt a more Romanized way of life, and that's what people do today. They adopt a westernized way of life, and then they get involved in the alphabet crew, and so on and so forth. And in the ancient Roman Empire, if you weren't Romanized, you were considered what? You were considered barbarian. It's another word for terrorist. So carrying on here, it says the taxman was called a publicanus, meaning public revenue. Publicans bid at the Roman Senate, open auctions for the right to collect taxes for a certain city or area under Rome's rule. Don't forget this, city spreads as far as its citizens. Today you would call these particular places countries, but technically these are cities, and that's what the Bible refers them to as. It says the publican's bid was commensurate with what was thought to be the possible income from that place. If he bid on Jerusalem, the income would be high, as his bid was high. If he bid on the small fishing village of Portofino, the income in revenue would be small, and his bid would be small. He made his money by making sure the expected revenue exceeded his bid. He paid the government the bid and pocketed the rest. Publicans came to be associated with the people's hatred of Rome, in addition to being a civil imposition. Just like today, people hate the taxman. It says the JEWs, particularly saw Roman taxes as tributes to a god they hated. And the reason why I'm saying JEWs, just to throw off the algorithm, obviously nowadays, this term is applied to the small hats, and at the minute they're they've lit up the algorithms. They're trying to catch anyone in their net. Caesars were all declared gods, and as a symbol of their slavery to Rome, in the New Testament, publicans and sinners are lumped together. JEW-ish publicans were especially hated by their fellow JEWs. Hawashai shockingly associated with and accepted all levels of society, so on and so forth. So that's all we really need there. Just to jump down a little bit further, it says when the Roman Empire was dying in the late 200s and early 300s, their financial resources had been stretched to the limit. They were spending a substantial part of their revenue on people, quote, on the dole. And that's what we have today, people on the benefits. And they brought this system in. And then, for example, during the time of 2020 and 2021, the governments were handing out money, printing money, handing it out, weakening the currency, driving up inflation, and ultimately bringing the system to a crash. They think they're going to reinvent it with this digital system, but all in all, this collapsing of the system is going to be the downfall of this particular empire, in the same way that we had similar problems in the ancient Roman Empire. So carrying on here, it says they were suspending a substantial part of their revenue on people on the dole, who received, on benefits, who received from the state free oil, grain, meat, and often wine. The cost of military maintaining order and repelling invasions on their far-flung borders was enormous. immigrants kept flooding into Rome, just like they do at the minute with Babylon the Great, America. And some say, they're purposely opening the borders to allow the people in to drive up this problem of inflation, to purposely crash the system. Immigrants kept flooding into Rome, and the cost of housing and feeding them was draining the treasury. The state had raised taxes on the wealthy so high that many fled their homes and settled in far away foreign lands. And it's the same thing today. You have America, which pushes forth this idea of, for example, democratic system or this alphabet system, and these other countries take it on board. Now they all get down with the democratic system. Maybe they don't want to accept the alphabet system, but ultimately, as long as they pay taxes, pay tributary, that's why we live in a world where these taxes are paid. And this is what it comes down to. You as an individual, you can worship what you like, pray to who you like. You go to America, that great hall that sitteth upon many waters. You can be of any nation, any language, any religion, any sexual orientation, and they'll accept you. And ultimately, that's why Jeremiah speaks of America being known as Babylon, land of confusion. Revelation 17:6, and I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahushua. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. So this explains the slave trade, and this woman, this whore, being drunken with the blood of the saints, the Israelites, and with the blood of the witnesses of Yahushua, so even members of the elect. And this is all through the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and the atrocities that have been done to the Israelites through these Idumeans. 17:7, and the angel said unto me, wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which have 7 heads and 10 horns. So this beast is carrying the woman, and so the woman decides where she wants to go, and it's the beast that's making her get there. And it's the same thing that that people are waking up to today. They're just starting to discover that this everything in this propaganda that is pushed out is all a lie. It's all in order for America to do what they want, and that's why they're starting to wake up and they're starting to be mad, especially with this situation happening down in the Middle East. People's eyes are starting to open up. Revelation 17:8 says, and the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend from the bottomless pit and go into perdition, into destruction. And again, it says, this beast which thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell on earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Don't forget the time that John was given this particular revelation. He was living in the ancient Roman Empire, and so it was still to see the downfall of the Edomites in the ancient Roman Empire, and then the rebirth when they came back to power through the revised Roman Empire that we're living in today. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, 7 governments. The mountains represents governments on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is yet not come, is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So this is John receiving this revelation at that particular time, roughly 2,000 years ago. It says here, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. Because the 1 is the one that he was in, the ancient Roman Empire. The 5 that have fallen, you've got the Greeks, the Spanish, the French, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and as I said, and the other, and 1 is, which is the Roman Empire that he was in, the ancient Roman Empire, and the other is not yet come. What we're living in, eventually the British Empire came, and when he cometh, the British Empire, he must continue a short space. So he continued. There was such thing as a British Empire for a short space of time, and out of that was born America. When you go to Daniel chapter 7, it speaks of the little horn. It pretty much gives you the same scenario, the same situation, with a different allegory, in a different way. But when you go to Daniel chapter 7 and you read of the little horn, this also represents America coming out of England. It says the British Empire, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, actually jumping back. See, so then after that, we then have America. See, after the British Empire, then we had America come into play. And what America has done is taken all the ideologies and the philosophies of the ancient Roman Empire and beyond. The Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire. Another one is spiritual Sodom, or spiritual mystery Egypt, ancient Egypt, Mizraim. What you have to understand is America in the scriptures is written in code, and it could be, there's a number of names that could be used, and these are names of kingdoms or empires in which America has copied certain philosophies. When these particular prophets of ancient times had these visions, they saw this particular land, they saw things that were happening, but they didn't know what the land was actually called. So they saw it, they saw certain things that were happening, and one prophet would have looked at it and said, well, this looks like spiritual Sodom, because the things they're doing in there resemble Sodom. And one prophet would have said, well, this is spiritual Egypt, and because the things he would have seen would have made him think, these philosophies of ancient Egypt, Mizraim, so on and so forth. When I came into this truth, I've explained before, I had a particular vision, and Yahweh Bahashim, Yahushua showed me ancient Mizraim, ancient Egypt, Mizraim, and showed me America, showed me everything in between, the captivity, and the moving across the earth and the traveling of different nations. And so when I saw this particular vision, at that point I'd read no scriptures, I had no understanding on the Bible, full stop, and I received this vision, and then I was shown one particular part with a land which was America, and I looked at it and I said, well, yeah, that's America. I recognized it. And when you think back to, we have understanding today which the prophets of ancient times didn't necessarily have. They saw the visions, they wrote them down. They may have seen a particular land, they looked at certain things that were happening there, and they said, well, this makes me think of spiritual Sodom or spiritual Mizraim. And so they wrote that down. And the way you have to look at it, these scriptures were then written down, pretty much wrapped up and thrown. And then you think over the course of a few thousand years, these scriptures are flying through the air, and now here we are in these latter days. We come back to our remembrance, and the prophets receive this word that they once knew. Once again, they remember, and they pretty much catch those flying prophecies, thrown from ancient time out into the future, and here we are. We catch them, and we unravel the prophecies. So, for example, in my experience, I've had to receive this vision, understand that what I saw was America, but I don't know why I was shown America. So I had to go to a teacher, an apostle, elder of GMS, and they would show me that captivity ends in America. The destruction of this empire ends in America. So it makes sense. The vision makes sense. In ancient time, the vision didn't necessarily make sense. They just understood what they saw and then wrote it down, and pretty much threw it into the future for the regeneration, for them prophets to come back in the latter days and to catch that prophecy, unravel it, read it, and with the Holy Spirit have the understanding, with the understanding of teachers, the elders and apostles, and break it down from there. So this is where we're at today. But yeah, back to the point, America is known in the scriptures as many different names, code words, and these are with reference to the ancient civilizations and philosophies that they've copied and followed. And it's mixed them all together. And then with that, you now have this spiritual fornication which she's committing with the kings of the earth. She's using these philosophies and these ideologies, and she's spreading them out and getting people to play ball with her. How? Using the beast system. And so we understand that the beast system, like I say, is NATO and the EU, and you see things like sanctions being placed on certain countries, and that's in order for them to manipulate them to play the way that America want them to play. And if you don't, you have sanctions hit upon you. And that's one way in which they use that beast system to gain what they need. And it says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. So you had the British Empire, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space, and then out of that comes the eighth, the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. The revised Roman Empire that was and is not, because it was in the ancient Roman Empire, and at the time it was speaking to John, the angel, it is not yet, because it's still to come. Even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. So once America came about, this empire was then heading for destruction. And again, like I say, you go back to Daniel chapter 7, and it speaks of this. And it says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as king 1 hour with the beast. So that represents the EU nations having power with the beast, and having some sort of say in terms of how the beast is manipulating how the system is set up. And obviously it's America that's manipulating the system. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. Speaking of Yahushai, all these nations will come together on the appearance of Yahushai and try to fight these angels with their fighter jets, and to no avail. It says, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And so Yahushua is coming to subdue all these kings, all these nations, and be King of kings. 17 and 15, and he saith to me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So we read that at the top. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For the Most High hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So this city is what you would call a country. But don't forget, a country is full of citizens, and a country only spreads as far as its citizens do. And so America is referred to as that great city. Great because it has those alliances with these other nations through that beast. So understanding this particular chapter, we understand what the beast system is, NATO and the EU. We understand eventually through chapter 13, eventually it will bring about the MOTB, the digitization. We know the WEF, the IMF are talking, for example, giving out this 2020 to 2030 date. We hear this date everywhere, in different places. And so this is this beast system that is pushing it. Now, when you go back to chapter 17, it says, verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So this is talking about EU nations shooting ICBMs upon America. and totally making that land desolate within 1 hour, as well as Russia and China and other nations around the earth. So this is what's going to happen in World War III, and you're trying to see how World War III coincides with the MOTB. We know that every time there's a world war, through the experience that we've had, World War II, for example, we know that it brings about a major worldwide monetary change. That's what we're about to see, according to Revelation chapter 13. So you've got to then look at the power struggle that's happening with the beast and the whore, which is going to bring about this World War III. The least of the flock is going to draw other nations into World War III, but ultimately these nations have an agenda, an underlying agenda to destroy America, which is what they will do. And the reason for that is because they want to remove the whore off the beast. You look at Putin and you think that Putin is against NATO, and he's got this front up against NATO, but he doesn't really have a problem with NATO. He has a problem with America riding that beast. And so what they really want to do is remove America from the beast and ride it themselves. That's what these other nations want to do. Understanding the UN and NATO and the EU, you have to look at the purpose of the UN, because now the UN are very big on this situation. When we look at where is it here, difference between NATO and the UN, not the EU. NATO and the UN are two organizations trying to work together despite the fact they have very different philosophies. NATO is an organization designed to fight war, if necessary, in order to defend peace, democracy, whereas the UN is an organization designed to avoid war in order to maintain peace. So wherever you see NATO, you're going to see the UN. If you're a rogue state and you're playing up and you're looking to go in and attack a group of people, and tensions are rising, ultimately the world police, NATO, and they might use EU forces, they'll come in and patrol you and stop you from doing it. But before they do that, they'll send the UN to come and speak to you. So the UN are very big when it comes to manipulating the beast system. And it's actually America that need the UN to manipulate that beast system. Although sometimes when they want, they do what they like. When it came to the invasion of Iraq, America had to get permission from the UN to go there. The UN said no, and guess what? They did it anyway. So ultimately, America's going to use that system, that NATO and EU, to do what they like. But these other nations are starting to wake up. They're mad. They've realized what America's been doing. And what they want to do really is to manipulate the UN to get in control of that, which then ousts America out of the hot seat, and they can then manipulate the beast system. And this is where this World War III trouble, ultimately spirals into. It starts off with the least of the flock, drawing them out. We're looking at the Middle East, the Levant, the partnerships that people like Iran have with Russia, and the small hats with America. But what's going to bring them to the point where they want to destroy America? They want to remove her out of that power seat. And like I say, these nations are waking up and they're starting to realize they're mad. As Jeremiah chapter 51 tells you, these nations are mad. So they want to do something about it. And the way they paint the picture in the media is if Putin is opposed to the NATO. Putin's not that opposed to it. He actually wants to be in control of it. So, when he's making all this fuss and this problem, he's pointing the finger at America. So, again, this is a very risky game that these banking elites are playing. They use the opposition to create the BRICS, to de-dollarize their currency, to crash it so they can bring about a CBDC, a new digital system. But while that's happening, these other nations are pretty much ready for a power grab. And so once the situation develops in the Middle East, these nations will have excuse to go to war, and in the back of their mind they will think, if we make the right moves, we can remove that whore off the beast, and the beast is now it has no rider, it has no person on it riding it, and we can be the one to take that on board. So, you've got to understand, when you're everywhere you go, Agenda 2020, 2030, it's been spoken of. You've got the WEF, the IMF that speak to you mostly about it, but other organizations speak of it too. And who's really running that agenda? It's the UN. They have a thing called SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And these have to be implemented by 2030. That's why countries are rushing to bring this digital system and so on and so forth, especially this situation with the ecosystem, these save the environment. This is all an agenda. This is all part of the UN. If you go back to the UN and you look at their Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, then you realize this is where the agenda gets set. The WEF, the IMF, and all these other organizations, these Greenpeace organizations, so on and so forth, they've all got this agenda for 2030. It all comes from the UN. And if you can manipulate the UN, you can manipulate the beast. America currently have that control, and that's how they ride the beast. So the UN is like the reins to the beast, pretty much. If that's one way I'm going to put it to you, you've got America, the whore, riding the beast, and the reins to the beast are the UN. And other nations like Russia have clocked this. So they're saying, well, if we can oust them and hold the reins in the UN, we control the system. And that's what's going to ultimately bring the destruction of America. They want them out of the way. Again, so when you look into the UN and their SDGs, it's all based around a digital system, a biometric system. And then it explains all the things that have been going on. So you look at the UN, and this is pretty much what they consist of. Now, Russia is not part of the beast system, and the beast system is NATO and EU. The reins to the beast is what you're looking at here, the UN, and Russia are part of that. They were a permanent member of that particular situation, but that's not actually the beast. It's the reins to the beast. Now, Russia have been voted out of that recently. When we go back, let's have a look here. So it says here, Russia was ousted of council 18 months ago in a US-led diplomatic push following its February 22 invasion of Ukraine. A UN-mandated investigative body said in March that Russia had committed a wide range of war crimes in Ukraine, such as willful killings, torture, and deportation of children. So Russia were part of the UN, and they've been ousted since happened with Ukraine. So they're now not part of UN. They were never part of NATO in the first place, which is the beast. But the UN is the reins for the beast. The reason why Russia kicks up such a fuss is because they're trying to highlight that the US unfairly manipulate the beast using UN as one example. So that's why the US come out and create Russia as the enemy. But ultimately, Russia is not an enemy to the UN or NATO. They just want to assume the control that America has at the minute. So, I tried to explain this and I hope it was edifying, but, what I'm going to do now is leave the link for this particular video in the description box. It says, who controls the world? You won't believe this. Well, you will if you understand the scriptures and the way that we break down these particular prophecies. If you understand that the MOTB is a digitization of the worldwide economic system, you understand that World War III is coming to play at the same time. A lot of these people don't seem to realize that these things are definitely going to happen. A lot of people are seeing the change with the digital system. A lot of people are thinking that World War III is on the cards. But one thing they don't know is that these are biblical prophecies. Another thing that people definitely don't know is how they interlink. Even if people are aware that these are biblical prophecies, are they aware how they interlink with each other? For example, people always ask the question, is Putin, working with these banking elites or against them? Like I say, the banking elites set him up as the opposition, and they use it. They use it to bring the chaos, BRICS, de-dollarization, crash the system, and then they'll come with the answer, the new answer. But at the same time, Putin has his own ideas. He wants to, assume power of that beast. He knows he can do it through the reins, which are UN. But at the minute, the relationship between the UN and America is pretty much unbreakable, because they really want to work with each other. Yet you have other things. There are many factors in this situation. So like I say, I've tried to explain it. I hope I've explained it well enough. But if you watch this video, this is about 20 minutes long, 25 minutes. And this guy will explain everything to a T in detail, and you'll gain a lot more understanding of what I'm telling you and how that everything's interlinked into one. We're in the last days, in the very, very last days, and Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, is bringing first of all, he's going to bring a great test for his people, the Israelites, a time of temptation, the MOTB. Then he's going to bring Jacob's trouble and World War III, the destruction. And these things all go in hand. Like I say, the world is a stage, and when you look in different areas, different places, you see different acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 taking place. This is all part of the same play. So you have to understand the individual plays that you see playing out and scenarios. This is one big play, and it's all interlinked. So I hope it's edifying. Until next time, I'm going to leave the link in the description box. I hope that's edifying. Until next time, all praises to Yahweh, B'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, B'Hashem, Rakak, Wadash, Shalom.